Welcome to Digital Transformation Bite Size. This is an interview series where I talk to experts and leading thinkers in the digital transformation, the robotic process automation, intelligent automation, and data analytics space. Welcome to today's interview.
Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you here. For those in the audience who don't know who you are or what you do, Peter, would you mind telling us?
Absolutely. So my name is Peter Baudis. I am a co-founder and CTO of Rossum, a solution for automating document communication. Historically, I've been quite a technology guy, so I worked on many open source projects, on many projects that are part of the Linux operating system, for example, and the Git version control system. And then I've been doing a lot of AI research. So I'm an AI researcher by trade. So, for example, if you have heard about AlphaGo, which is the DeepMind's effort to build to build a champion in the board game of Go. I have been building one of the predecessors to that program. So I have a lot of artificial intelligence background, and then I co-founded Rossum. And at Rossum, we are working on automating document communication, as I mentioned, and that's a very AI-heavy task, actually. So we have a lot of neural networks in the background, and I've been contributing to that a lot. But also thinking a lot in a bigger picture. How can we help organizations automate, and what are the right perspectives on that?
Oh, wow. A very impressive background and very impressive work. I'm a fan of open source. What is document automation?
For me, documents are sort of the arteries of the business world, actually, because let's think about what documents are, what purpose they serve first before we talk about automating them. If I grab any item on my table, for example, let's say this USB dongle or whatever else, there is actually hundreds of companies working on the background to get this USB dongle to my table. It's the plastic companies, the manufacturers, there's the electronics, then there is freight and shipping, there's the retail. So many companies working together. And those companies, when they work together, they exchange documents, because document for me is in general a way for humans and companies to exchange complex information. Anytime they do that, they use documents. Sometimes these are machine-readable XMLs as documents, but super often those are PDF files with some layouts, scattered information, and so on. And for those companies to cooperate, they need to use documents. And when you think about it this way, automating documents is super exciting because right now, to process those documents, those companies, obviously, they employ huge open spaces full of people working full-time on getting data from those documents, on issuing those documents, and that's just crazy nowadays, and it slows the world down as well, because it should take minutes for two companies nowadays to talk to each other, but it takes often weeks, because some document somewhere is sitting in some queue waiting to be processed. So document automation for me is really automating this so that we can improve the lives of people working in this domain, but also to make the whole world go faster.
I love that answer, and I love the phrase that you mentioned, that documents are the arteries of organizations. I'm not going to forget that one. Beautifully put. What do you see as the biggest shift then, Peter, or what do you see is going to happen in the industry in the next couple of years?
Mm-hmm. I think there are two main shifts that I see. One of them is the technology is going forward, and this space has some catching up to do from my perspective. So I think we'll definitely especially see a shift to more AI being used, smarter AI being used, and shift to the cloud from on-prem solutions. And then the other shift is about the paradigm we are taking. Because if you look at documents, and huge amount of documents really fit this bucket very well as ways for companies to communicate, we should be talking about documents as part of this communication of those two different entities talking to each other, rather than being piece of some internal company process.
You mentioned AI there in document management. Isn't AI a bunch of hype just?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it is overhyped. It is, I think, quite difficult to make sense of all the claims out there. Even us, when we are starting Rossum with AI research as our background, it seemed to us, just looking at websites of different vendors, that this problem is solved, that everyone is offering 100% accuracy, everything is fully automated, everything is fine. Only when we actually talked to a couple of people out there in the weeds implementing this, we have learned that this is not solved at all at that point when we were starting the company, and only that encouraged us to really apply modern AI to the process. And I think the best way to make sense of it, to differentiate between the hype and whatever is real, is to double down in your exploration of different vendors to companies who offer a free trial, because that's actually a very good sign that this company doesn't actually require anyone to fine-tune the solution, and there is actually not some solution engineer in the background instead of the AI. But that this is something real, and you can try it out yourself, and you can feel the accuracy, and you can also feel how the AI is wrapped by other things. How good the user interface is surprisingly important for the usability of the AI solution. You can have a high accuracy solution, but if it's actually very difficult to catch those mistakes that the AI still makes and always will make, then it's actually worse than if you have a slightly worse AI, but a great way to catch those mistakes. So I would be comparing those vendors who are courageous enough to put this out there and think not just about the AI, but how the AI can work actually in the process as well.
We hear a lot in the market about automation. Isn't RPA the space to be? Is that where the future of automation is going, or do you see it differently?
I think RPA is extremely important, and it's a super powerful tool. And obviously, in many of those document-focused processes, the RPA plays a huge role, and also the biggest RPA vendors, they have some solutions of their own, some basic ways to get data from those unstructured documents. But truth to be told, I think the focus of RPA is to connect a lot of diverse systems together. But if you are thinking about automating a process which involves communication with another company, that's what I meant by the paradigm shift to automating end-to-end communication. You shouldn't be thinking about integrating different systems within a single company, automating a process, but you should be thinking about automating communication, automating different entities talking to each other. And each entity speaks a bit different language. It can be literary language, or it can be the layout of documents they are using. And it's in many situations not easy at all for them to adapt to you and your needs. So you need to adapt to them, and that's, I think, where this different picture of automating communication comes in, because we are not talking about the capture of data from documents, but we are talking about the full stack, from receiving the documents to getting the data out, getting humans involved when needed, automating also the exception handling. Whenever something is actually wrong on a document, what happens? Does someone pick up a phone or start typing an email, or is this also automated? All the way to getting this to a target system. And at that point, RPA can be useful. It's always better in general, or a good rule of thumb, that native integration is the best you can go with. But if you don't have resources for that, then RPA's place there is perfect. But to talk to other companies, you really want some kind of universal translator, and you want a solution that's focused specifically on that problem. So I think it's quite complementary to RPA.
You talked about exceptions a moment ago. What do you mean by exceptions? Because surely for document automation, you have to take in a huge variety of different documents from different companies in different standards. So what is it that you mean by exceptions and how do you handle them?
Absolutely. So in a traditional intelligent data capture world, in a traditional IDP world, exception makes exception. What exception means is anytime the document doesn't fit one of your templates, one of your rules, one of your zones you have configured, and it needs to be handled by a human. I am using the word exception in a similar sense, but in the AI context, it means something less serious, I would say, in one sense. So, the difference of an AI-based solution compared to a traditional template-based solution is that actually the AI, from almost any document you pass it, it will extract at least part of the data, but sometimes it needs some slight tweaks. So then the user interface typically is really streamlined to make those tweaks easy and to use those tweaks to keep training and improving the AI. This is the power of AI-based solutions. So you don't really have a separate team maintaining the configuration, the templates, and so on, but you have a self-learning solution. So that's one kind of exception. But then in the communication context, it's also a question of what happens when something is wrong on the document. And things are wrong on documents all the time in many of the cases. You can have a wrong VAT number, or actually the VAT rate when there is, for example, a change in the tax laws. You can have some missing amounts, all sorts of stuff where the document is actually not right. And then the question is, when a human looks at this document, do they do the correction on the receiving side? Maybe just the AI made a mistake, or is it actually wrong on the document sent by the sender, and the sender should make a revision? And even in the second case, if you have a communication solution should be able to also handle two-way communication. So it can actually send, for example, it can send an email to the sender with a button letting them to validate the document themselves, or just to let them, there is some issue, and I want you to decide, please, whether you want to resubmit the document or whether you think we got it wrong. And that can be a computer form. And only when the sender escalates through this computer form, a human looks at it. Otherwise, it's fully automated from the recipient's perspective. And the sender's value there, when they are budgeted by those emails, is that their document actually gets processed faster. It's not sitting in some exception queue for weeks, but they can resolve it right then and get paid for their invoice, for example, or their order can get into manufacturing.
So challenge then. So what's so different about Rossum that makes your company unique in this space?
I think it's two things where we have pretty strong opinions about this space, which we really try to entrench in Rossum. One of them is really focusing on state-of-art AI. So many customers, when they talk to us why they choose Rossum, they said we have compared 5 different systems, and Rossum is the best for us, has the highest accuracy, and we really like the speed of learning there, which we experience with the user interface. So we have a really advanced set of neural networks that can really deal with a wide variety of documents, and also pretty complex documents in terms of for example, table complexity and other things. So that's one big difference. And obviously, other companies, other vendors also keep improving their AI, but we are not sleeping in this area as well, and keep improving. So that's one thing, but I think even more important is what's the value proposition of Rossum, and it's actually quite different from a typical IDP vendor, because we really focus on those use cases which are involved in this communication aspect. So we are really there for companies who realize that their business communication is document-based and that it's slowing them down and wasting time of their people, and they want to solve this document problem end-to-end. So they are looking for a universal gateway covering a wide variety of use cases, in a single place, with a single place where they can train their team, where they can solve security and compliance and all those aspects lined up. And also something that handles it end-to-end for them, from reliable reception of all the emails, even handling PDFs and EDI communication, for example, in a single place, all the way to the integration part. So other IDP vendors, they focus on different things. Maybe they focus on RPA. That's great. That's fine. Maybe they focus on high volume traditional cases like extracting data from checks and things like that. For us, the niche is really automating those business communication cases, and we love working with customers who have exactly this problem.
Gartner talk about hyper automation. They talk about automating end-to-end processes. What's your take on that?
Absolutely, they do, and I totally agree with them. For them, the main argument is that you really want a hyper automation single solution rather than putting many different tools together as a process owner or a CIO of a company, because it actually makes it quite challenging to maintain this long term, but also to implement this in the beginning, because you need to make all those tools work with each other. So I totally agree with this mindset. And this is actually exactly where we are going with this communication as well, because when we focus on communication, we want to provide an end-to-end solution as well, rather than putting together a different set of tools. For example, receiving emails. Maybe there are some special fraud and spam aspects that you would like to take care of when it's about getting orders and invoices, compared to when you are getting regular emails, through this data capture aspect, but also through the exception resolution aspect. When we are handling two-way communication, what we can do is we can optionally show your senders the same validation window as your team is using, just to increase your rates of automation even more, and give the senders a freedom of using that to speed up the process and for you to increase the automation, all the way to integration. And even for the integration, our big focus is handling this natively, and RPA is an option. But we think specifically when it's a process which is about communication, multiple different companies or even multiple different organization units in a large enterprise working with each other, an end-to-end solution really works the best.
So, not quite ignoring Rossum at the moment, but with a very independent lens, what are the key things that people should consider when they're looking at an IDP, an intelligent document processing platform?
Yeah. So, frankly, I don't think Rossum is always the right answer. I'm not a salesman who would tell you that you should always use Rossum, because there are cases where a different solution can give you faster value, and I think I would always start with the process. Thinking about the process, this IDP solution should be involved with. So if it's a process where you have very repetitive documents, each of them looks exactly the same, there is no variety. Maybe those documents just sit there on some disk, and they are not really exchanged between companies. It's something internal to your company, some archive you need to process, and so on. And then I think template-based solution is fine, and maybe you don't need all the AI and cloud aspects. They will not give you much value, because in those cases, having an on-prem template-based solution probably gets you running faster and gets you to value faster. If you have a large variety of documents, and when you want to do something a bit more complex with those documents and with the data from those documents, you want to validate them compared to some internal systems, you potentially want to escalate some exceptions to the creator of the document, and so on, then it's time to think about AI. And with AI always comes a huge value proposition of cloud, because essentially you are saving a lot of time on maintenance, but also the initial rollout, because no one needs to configure each different layout when you have a huge variety. You get the end-to-end solution with all the added benefits. With some of those extra features, you will never get to the automation potential that you can if you actually leverage that this is a process with multiple parties and use a solution which understands this process.
So let's assume people want to buy Rossum just for a moment then.
Absolutely.
How did they find out a little bit more about the company? How might they connect with you in particular?
Sure. So the best way is to find our homepage. It's rossum.ai. That's Rossum with double S. And there they can navigate to different aspects of the product. If some developers are listening, we have a dedicated developer hub for those people who can learn about the APIs. If it's people from specific, for example, accounts payable people, we have dedicated pages for all those different solutions and accounts payable, logistics, and so on. And I think the best next step is to actually create a trial account. That's like a 30-second process, and you can just upload any document you want and see it in action. And I think that's really powerful, and lets you decide on your own whether this is the right way to do things, or whether you would prefer a different way. And then either we approach you proactively during the trial process, or you can just contact us through a form on our webpage, and one of our automation experts will be super happy to talk to you.
Or do what I did, which is connect with you on LinkedIn and
Yep,
then start a conversation. Look, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time to talk about IDP and then mentioning Rossum as well. Definitely will remember your phrase, the documents are the arteries of organizations. With the billions of documents still in the world, I wonder if they're clogging the arteries of organizations. But it's great to see organizations like yourself and companies like yourself who are putting things into the cloud and using AI to solve for that. I wish you every success in the future. Stay safe, be good, and I'll talk to you again, no doubt, very, very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of pleasure talking about those topics, Kieran. Take care, everyone.